Drop off the bicycle, drop me, and instead of saying, Grace, how are you? Say, anybody see me? Anybody see me? Doesn't want to tell that story. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Grace Baston. I am principal of Campion College. This afternoon, though, I speak as a member of the Ecumenical Education Committee. Why me? I'm not so sure. I wanted to borrow Dr. Morgan's voice or one of the crosses of the bishops to give me some gravitas. So we would say, yes, this is a lady who should speak for this body. But alas, I don't have any of those. But I will try my best to represent the group. As Deacon Craig said at the beginning, the EEC, as we call ourselves, consists of representatives of the owners of denominational schools and trust schools. And we've been meeting regularly since 2009 to consider matters on education. The Jamaica, as he told you also, the Jamaica Council of Churches, the member churches, own a large number of churches, including 8 tertiary level institutions. So about 35% of the public schools are ours. Our history, therefore, and we're talking about investment in land, in funding, in supervision, in personnel, our history, our state, our investment in this enterprise is monumental. And so we are therefore very, very keenly interested in this report on the Jamaica Education Funding Commission, which is supposed to provide the roadmap for the transformation of the sector. So first of all, the EEC, I'm sure Professor she's gone, wants to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that went into creating that report, and wants to thank all of the good people who contributed their expertise and their time. I'm very sorry that I'm here. A lot of them graduates of our own schools. Right? We're very grateful for the work they did. And the Commission agrees with almost all of the findings and recommendations of the committee does. My presentation this afternoon, though, will just simply highlight some of what we find most compelling, to draw attention to certain significant omissions, certainly from our perspective, and then to make some recommendations. So I will restrict my comments to just 4 sections of the report. The governance, as Dana did, early childhood education, we're going to repeat the same, going to be a repetition, but I think it's worth repeating. Funding, especially the funding of secondary schools, my bias, and then teaching and curriculum, specifically the question of philosophy of education and the role of character formation. So, to start, governance. Christian denominations and trusts in Jamaica understand themselves to be carrying out their mission to educate in partnership with the state. And therefore it is the integrity and the stability of that partnership that must be the focal point of any conversation about the future of denominational and trust-sponsored educational institutions in Jamaica. The spirit and the spirit of the covenant relationship that existed between the churches, trusts, and the government, which later became formalized in granting its status in the 1950s, that spirit is hardly discernible sometimes. What is left, what we have, is the inadequate sketch of a contractual arrangement in the education regulations. And it is instructive that the report makes very little mention of this crucial relationship between government and denominations and trusts throughout its review of the system. And the issue is completely absent from the list of, I quote, key areas of amendments to the regulations proposed by the Commission in its discussion of the need for legislative change. It's not mentioned there at all. It lists 4 or 5, I think 16, but not the partnership between church and state and trust. Urgently needed, therefore, from where we stand, is an updating, a renegotiation, a strengthening, and a renewed commitment to this partnership in light of our 21st century reality. The terms and conditions of the partnership must be codified in the education regulations. We must bring an end to the lapses in communication, the frequent instances of announcement of policy before consultation, the creeping encroachment on the rights of the owners of the schools, which may be construed at best as protectionist or oversight, and at worst as disrespect or disregard. So the EEC is insisting that the education regulations be amended to ensure the recognition of the churches and trusts as significant partners in this enterprise, and that in relation to property, the owners will be assured the right of of all denominational schools. Early childhood education. So the EEC unequivocally supports the recommendation to prioritize the early childhood sector for urgent intervention. It's called, I think it's called in the report ECD 8. That is, ensure adequate financing of this sector, if necessary, reallocate funds from other levels of the education system as recommended by the World Bank, this being the foundational level of the entire system. I've lifted that straight from the report, ECD 8. Okay. In many ways, friends, I don't have to say this, we've said it, this is the arena in which the battle is won or lost. We must not continue to leave the formation of our children at this most critical stage of their development to the least qualified and most poorly remunerated teachers. Nor must we deprive this sector of the funding it needs. The ministry, while giving a nod to this recommendation, I heard the minister herself, she said, yes, I agree we must prioritize early childhood, but she's quick to say after that, but we need to pay attention to all sectors. You know, and she is right, we must. But in the interest of addressing the root cause of half of our school leavers being semi-literate and innumerate, we must prioritize. Now, this is perhaps my own reflection, but I want to say additionally, we continue to ignore the profoundly alienating and disenfranchising effect of not recognizing that most of our children from poorer homes have a first language which is not standard English. And the failure to take this reality seriously, to draw on the extensive research done by our scholars in linguistics at UWI, and to have teachers trained in the ability to engage students in their first language, and then through that language introduce them to standard English, is an act of injustice. So mastery of English is not so necessary for them passing PEP or passing CSEC, but in fact for all their exams, for the very STEAM subjects that the Patterson Commission wants to say is how we should be moving. The heart of STEM culture, and even more importantly, the recognition of the mother tongue of our children, this major index of their identity, is essential for their growth in self-love, self-respect, self-appreciation, agency, the hallmarks of any truly liberative education. And so again, the EPC is surprised that this major pedagogical issue, stymieing the academic achievement of so many of our children, does not appear in this report. Finally, funding. Again, the EPC is calling for immediate action on recommendation FIN 6. That is, revisit aspects of the no-fee policy at the second level. And I read it, consider constructive policy options that allow for greater enforcement of auxiliary fees by households that can pay, provide increased targeted support to schools to substitute for amounts that would otherwise be due as auxiliary fees from low-income households. My principal colleagues here are tired and they've been beating themselves out trying to convince their parents, hey, that's what we do. Morning, noon, and night. The no-fee policy has been disastrous for our secondary schools, where compliance rates with parent contributions have plummeted. To be clear, monies collected from our parents in our schools are not simply nice additional extras for development projects or for trust funds. They are essential for funding school operations. The facilities and resources, the very ones presented by the Patterson report as necessary for a well-functioning and high-performing education system, are simply not affordable with government grants alone. So, for example, a simple example, schools serious about ICT integration, one of the centerpieces of the report, right? We must have ICT integration. Any school who's serious about that has to create a post named Director of Technology. We don't mean an IT teacher with a little time. We don't mean a technician. We don't mean the head of IT department in his spare time. We mean somebody with the skills and the competences to manage major networks, network security, how to manage and handle domains, data, a whole host of things, and first has to be paid. Those folks other centerpieces of the Patterson report's recommendations. Welfare programs, all necessary elements for carrying out what churches and trusts believe is their mission to form the entire student. Funds generated from our alumni associations, our parent-teachers associations, other benefactors, or relationship with our parents enable us to provide this product. When our partners at the Ministry of Education make pronouncements like, all funds held in the name of the school are public funds and property of the government of Jamaica, those funding sources receive these kinds of announcements as alarm bells, and school owners have to work hard to prevent them from trying. And so the EEC insists that in the qualification of our partnership with the government of Jamaica, it is made clear once again, so we believe it is already clear in the existing regulations, that all funds solicited and collected in the name of the institution belong entirely to the institution and must be lodged in separate private accounts of the school and not for the It has sometimes been insinuated that our schools use these monies for dubious purposes, right? That they are not really necessary for the core functions. It's just that these principals want extra money for I don't know what. I think insinuations. You hear it out there. We, the EEC, asks that where this charge is made, it be proved, it be demonstrated. We are ready to open our books to show how these funds are expended for the purpose of advancing our mission. This is not helpful. As I said, it turns your benefactors away. From time to time, again in the public arena, there are suggestions that the church and trust schools are not performing in the real interest of educating Jamaica's children, that they're not conducting their affairs in ways consistent with government policy. They're interested only in doing their own thing and in ignoring the Ministry of Education. A radio talk show once said to me, so Baston, your position is that the Ministry of Education is not to say anything to you in the running of your school. This, he concluded, from my insistence on the need to have parents pay fees. He was wrong. The churches and trusts seek only to perform in the best interest of education, to cooperate with the government in delivering the best programs of formation to our nation's children, not to flout laws and regulations. And so where there is evidence to the contrary, let it be brought forward and dealt with. And lastly, teaching and the curriculum. So the EEC notes with interest the Commission's comment on teaching curriculum and teacher training. It expresses a concern about quotation marks an outdated educational philosophy that supports a two-teacher dominant pedagogy focused on the 3 R's. The 3 R's, right? Reading, writing, and arithmetic. And then the report goes on to endorse quotation marks an approach which emphasizes teaching and learning as a collaborative process around an instructional core that engages teachers, students, in a dynamic curriculum supported by out-of-school stakeholders in a local and broader community.
Wow.
So our first observation is that an education philosophy is not simply a teaching approach. It talks about the lack of a philosophy and then goes on to recommend an approach. We absolutely agree that there is an absence of an overarching philosophy of education underpinning planning and policy, which probably accounts for the institutional incoherence that Dr. Mark Stinson spoke about and that the report talks about. Every child can learn, every child must learn. It's a catchy slogan, but it's not a philosophy of education. However, neither is what is recommended by the Commission in the paragraph above, which is in fact a pedagogical approach and one that I must confess I don't really understand.
Okay.
Or the Americans would say it needs to be unpacked for me. It contains all the hooray words in contemporary theories of education. Collaborative, interactive, social knowledge, team, student centered. And I contrast these with the boo words in educational theory today. Direct teaching, memorization, rote learning. Right? If you say those, everybody say boo, and if you say those other ones, everybody say yay. No, this is not easy. This is Grace Baston, teacher. My own opinion is that we need to be cautious about adopting educational fads, especially those coming out of the United States. The 3 3 R's dismissed in the report as outdated are precisely what our students need to master, albeit using teaching methodologies that are engaging and much of what our grade 5 and 6 children are being exposed to as science and social studies in the national standards curriculum could well be done without. Their preparation for secondary level education will be complete if they have good manners, a foundational grasp of standard English, which will allow them to speak and write the language effectively at their grade level, if they were literate, had a love of reading, and mastery of the rudiments of arithmetic. Done. Enough. The use of Benedict's reagent to identify the presence of reducing sugars, attempting to solve mathematics problems that prove challenging to Cape students, or researching the observance of Hanukkah by Jews in the Caribbean, and all wait until they're in high school, or maybe university. Mastery of the 3 R's with some good manners. Right. Lastly, this is the last one. To return to the question of our philosophy of education, the EEC stands ready to share our vision for the ultimate end and aim of the education enterprise, which is what the philosophy is. The schools we operate are not simply places where lessons are delivered. We see them, trusts and churches, as centers of formation.
Yes.
Where the evangelizing mission of the church, in the case of denominational schools, is carried out. And what is that mission? Not proselytizing. It is the task of promoting what we refer to as the kingdom of God. And that broken down means a world characterized by justice, peace, love, and respect for the dignity of every human person. And that's what we are about. And you will agree that this is a vision much broader than achieving literacy and numeracy, or passing 5 C-sex subjects, English and maths, and certainly one compatible with the goals stated in the report of promoting values that nourish our national culture, civil society, and stability. Our curricula then, trust and church schools, are infused with, undergirded by this philosophy, and it involves intentional character formation. Education in our schools is never values-free, it is always values-laden. Because we're unapologetic about the type of person we're trying to form. Our religious education classes are not meant to promote fundamentalism or to proselytize, as I said before, but neither are they simply courses in comparative religion or the sociology of religion. They, along with our co-curricular programs, we have football, we have, not because champs must win and Manning Cup must win, but because those experiences teach our children values, how to win graciously, how to lose graciously, how to be reliable, how to be a team member. Those classes and our co-curricular program are how we teach our students to become virtuous people. A whole-time notion, but that's what we're about. Regrettably, sometimes the material designed by the Ministry of Education to teach positive values conflicts with our philosophy and our understanding of the nature and destiny of the human person. So it is essential that going forward, our schools not be forced to use curricula or material objectionable to the owners. To this end, EEC insists that the education regulations be amended to ensure that no books, no curriculum content to which the denominational or trust authority formally objects will be introduced or imposed. The EEC is very proud of the transformation that its member denominations and trusts have effected in the lives of thousands of Jamaicans, starting with Nile, by being the first to own and operate schools in this country, and later through collaboration with the government to bring education opportunities to even more of our people. But like all Jamaican citizens, we are deeply troubled by the general failure of our education system. Some of our own schools so clearly demonstrated in the sterling data that the Patterson report presented. We stand ready to collaborate with the state to address the crisis we face in education, but we insist that we do so as equal partners. Yeah.